And there's one rule that matters above all else, Mike. It's truth. What is true? Why it's true? Where is the truth? How to get to the truth? Like, truth ought to be in everyone, whether Christian or not. The rule above all else, let's reach for truth. Hence, when you fall into relativistic societies, you end up having a disaster on your hand years later.
We don't think anything of it when we're scrolling through our phones and absorbing information, but are we thinking of how it's forming our minds or deforming our minds? We become what we behold.
Right.
And at risk of sounding overly simplistic, it really, to me, comes back to the simple idea that when we're directing our attention back to Christ, and like you said, Ryan, we're actually taking those thoughts to him.
Welcome back to another episode of the Caffeinated Christian Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Willard, and I'm sitting here with Pastor Mike Rigglesworth. Pastor Mike, how are you doing? Oh, I love the cup. I love it.
It's so, see, this cup says some mornings are rough, and it's a picture of Mickey holding a coffee mug. It's actually
his coffee mug is his own pants. That's sort of like real interesting. Yeah, that's sort of like meta to a certain extent. Is that whatever the phrase is?
Right. It's kind of fun, isn't it? But it's a cup that fits the my mood of the morning, at least. We've been struggling with our kids with daylight savings time. You push the clock back an hour, and guess what happens? You don't get an extra hour of sleep. If you're a parent, you get up an extra hour early because your kids got you up.
Oh yeah, I'm there too, Mike. 5:30.
Yeah.
I'm awake.
My kids are getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. Yeah.
You making them stay up later? Like Sarah and I will force ourselves to stay up. Even that means, like, the other day I walked around. I stood up and watched TV for like 45 minutes because I know if I sat down I was gonna zonk out, just to try to break the system.
Yeah, there's the Buffalo Bills game this past Sunday, and we had the kids stay up and watch it. So they got to bed probably an hour past when they would normally get to bed. And we did it for that reason. That didn't do anything.
Yeah.
No, because they go to bed late and they just get up at the same time they would have gotten up anyway. That's how their body works, apparently. It's a cruel joke that God is playing on us. And it's proof that he has a sense of humor.
Cool. But Mike, talk about what you're drinking while you have it up.
I'm drinking Jamaican Me Crazy. This is Bones coffee.
Oh.
It's really good stuff. Can't beat it. There's a lot of Jamaican Me Crazies out there. There's a lot of crazies out there. Yep. There's a lot of Jamaican Me Crazy flavors out there, and I prefer Bones coffee.
Especially yesterday, because it was a full moon. Mike, I swear that's true. I mean, like, I texted Sarah. I'm like, I've been witness to like 2 car accidents already today. What is happening? And she responds, it's like the biggest harvest moon of the season.
Yeah.
Just like, well, there it is. And she sees it in the hospital. And statistically, there's like this increase of injuries and problems closer to the full moon. It's just statistically true. It's very.
Do you find? Okay, so this I think segues into what we're going to be talking about today. Perfect.
Okay. Should I do my coffee real fast?
Do your coffee, yes. Okay. Before we get into it.
Okay, so.
What's in yours?
I'm drinking pumpkin. Let me quickly talk about this.
Ooh.
It's from Columbus Coffee Festival 2025. I think it was their 10-year. Mike, you can buy like a 2-day weekend. There is probably 100 different coffee vendors with 6 different flavors and kinds, and they give you this cup, and you walk around all day, just drinking free coffee.
Why is this not a thing in Buffalo?
Like,
why does this not exist here?
It was like I took some drug, and then like an hour later, I was like, I probably had 5 cups of coffee. It got to the point where I was just like, yo, can you just give me one sip?
Coffee festival.
It was incredible.
Man. It was all right, Buffalo listeners. If you're in Buffalo and you're listening to this podcast, you should pray about starting a coffee festival in Buffalo. I'm not saying you need to or you should, but pray about it.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
Yeah, my buddy Christian came down for it, and he was like, an hour after, he's like, I need a nap. I'm getting crushed right now. but it was good. So
Oh,
go back to what you're saying, Mike.
oh, that's great. Well, we were talking about the full moon, harvest moon,
Yes.
and do you find that affects your mindset and your mood when there's a
Yes.
full moon? Yeah,
100%.
that's
100%.
crazy, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
I was very moody. I was short with my kids more so than I typically am. Just generally not in a great mood, and I didn't have any conceivable reason why. And I think part of it is because like we are God's creation and we're connected to God's creation. I don't think it's a new agey thing. I think it's just a thing. But I just found that interesting. And the reason I asked that is because we're talking primarily about how do we, as scripture says, take our thoughts captive, surrender them to Christ, like Paul says in Romans 12, be transformed by the renewing of your mind so that you'll be able to test and approve God's pleasing and perfect will. Uh, I think elsewhere in scripture we hear thoughts like think think Christ's thoughts after him.
Hmm.
So you recently read a book by Max Lucado that gets into like how do we do that? So we're gonna hand it over to you. What did you discover?
Yeah, let me shout out Max Lucado for a quick second. I think it was this year it came out, 2025. I'll show the book for anyone who is
Okay,
on YouTube. It's called
tame your
Tame Your
thoughts.
Thoughts. I'm gonna turn this back because I can't read backwards. Three tools to renew your mind and transform your life. Now, I don't know what recently, Mike, the idea of transforming your mind and neuroplasticity has been interesting to me. So in the morning, it's like a very, very side project where instead of just watching TV all morning, I'll read like a half an hour on the topic. And this was the first one I got because it'd be nice to get like a sort of a layman's understanding of what scripture says and very practical usages before I start diving into like 20 minutes of the philosophy and science behind it. But so this is a very, very good book for the everyday person. I know, as you know, Max Lucado is Mike. He's a very good writer, writes a lot, but he's not writing any PhD dissertations.
No, and you didn't strike me as a Max Lucado type of guy. I was
No,
surprised.
the first thing I wanted to do was I like to read all different levels of theology when it comes to certain topics. And so I'll read sort of the everyday, I don't want to say common because that sounds insulting, but
Yeah, I get it.
book that you would find at like Barnes and Noble, like an everyday
Right.
everyone can read no matter
Yeah.
what, and then sort of work my way up to like more of the PhD theologians in particular,
hmm
because I think
Yeah,
this
you're
is so practical. Sometimes it's not necessarily all we should have, but you should also have this, if that makes sense.
absolutely
And yeah, I'm not really a Max Lucado type reader, but after reading this, I'm like, I think his book for the everyday person it was a good book. Um,
great.
and one of the things that was very useful, I think, for anyone listening to this is the first few chapters were sort of giving his take, sort of an
hmm
overall understanding of what it means, how to look at it, which we'll be discussing the first few chapters today. But then after that, he automatically then goes into major topics that everyone, and especially Christians, struggle with. For instance, like guilt, joy, lust, being
Yep.
overwhelmed, pain, rejection, satisfaction, stuff like that, right? And then
hmm
in the back, he has questions for reflection. On each chapter, he has scriptural database for each. So if you're talking about pain, you go to back and here is all the tons of verses on pain and how to look at it. And then at the end, he obviously has
Yeah,
his footnotes on his bibliography, which is very, very helpful. So it's a good tool to have as a pastor where you want to go, hey, if someone comes to me with this, where can I go? And then you just immediately have a whole sort of source list of categories of verses that you can go to, which is really good.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So, taming your thoughts, let's talk about the first chapter, if you will, because the subtitle is Three Tools to Renew Your Mind and Transform Your Life. Now, they're going to seem very sort of like you might go, well, duh. But how often do we take the duh and use it in our real life?
Right. Yeah,
A lot of times we go, this is so
for sure.
simple. But every once in a while, it's good to remind ourselves, like, hey, are we actually
Yep.
like practicing these particular tools
Well,
that we?
and I think we get that in church all the time too. We tell people basic things like regularly pray, regularly read your Bible, and they're like, yeah, I know, but then they don't do it.
Yeah,
And
I
it's the same with mind practices. Yeah.
and I wonder, Mike, and this could be a different topic, if the everyday church has made these things so common, or they've made it seem like so underwhelming of what kind of privilege it is that people just sort of go, "Oh yeah." Does that make
Hmm.
sense? Like,
Sure.
we'll never pray. But it's like, no, no, like you have an opportunity to pray to God. Like, realize
Yeah.
how cool that is. But we just sort of throw pray out or faith out as sort of this gumball
Well,
that people just don't really have weight to it.
and as a general rule, I think we have to give the why behind the what. Like we could tell people what they need to do until we're blue in the face.
Mhm.
But I think when I'm interacting with my kids, more with my daughter, my older daughter, than with my son.
Sure.
But if if you there are situations where if you tell her to do something and you don't give her a good reason why, she's like, why? It doesn't make any sense. But
Right.
when you explain to her, you give her the logic behind what you're saying, what you're telling her to do, she'll
Mhm.
usually be like, "Oh, okay."
Mhm.
She needs that, and I think most people need that. And so it seems to me that Max Lucado is not only saying, "Hey, we should be taking our thoughts captive. We should be taming our
Mhm.
thoughts and taking them captive, surrendering them to Christ." But it seems to me, looking basically at your outline of these first three chapters, he gives you the why,
Yes.
which I
Oh,
appreciate.
100%. That's one of the things I did appreciate because he starts off, and I kind of love the title of chapter one. And I think it's more profound than I think people might give him credit for. And it's titled this: Think about what you think about.
Hmm.
Very interesting concept.
Metacognition.
Yeah, yeah, right. And so he goes into starting off, and one of the things I really like about Lucado is he is not one of these Christians who is like faith and science is sort of mutually exclusive. There is a
Right.
both and, which I don't know as a Christian how you can't understand that to be the case, right? If God is the God of the physical world and the spiritual world, it
Yeah.
only seems plausible that what you do in the spiritual world can affect your physical and physical. Like, there's
Yeah.
this two, God works in this two-way street, right?
Sure.
Why would not
Hmm.
his creation, who's made in his image, also work in a two-way street? It just, I don't know
Absolutely.
why people just assume it can't. It's very weird.
Right. And people forget, like, one of the gospel writers was a medical doctor.
Yeah, right?
So, granted, medical advancements have changed significantly in the last two millennia, but keeping that in mind, like he was not anti medicine in his
Or
day
anti-spiritual. Right.
or anti spiritual.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think agenda driven science,
Mhm.
agenda driven faith, uh, those are opposed to each other.
Yes. I would
But I
agree with
don't
that.
think, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he starts off with an interesting statistic. On average, and he quotes all of these, you can look in their footnotes and all the sources and the years and all that wonderful stuff. On average, a person has roughly 70,000 thoughts each day.
Whew.
70,000 thoughts each day. No wonder why people are mentally tired some of these days. Like, that's crazy.
Wow.
Whether you're conscious or can remember, oh, sorry, consciously aware, obviously you're conscious, right? Consciously aware of it or or you're purposely doing it, right? There's 70,000
Now,
is nuts to
now
think about.
that's a now that's a general number for the entire human population, right?
Sure.
Does that
But that,
number drop when you're looking at males versus females?
you know what? He didn't go into that.
Okay.
That wasn't the purpose of the
It's like
I'm sure in the article he might refer to that.
because
Um,
I could almost guarantee that females probably have more thoughts than males do.
sure. Right.
I
Sure.
don't have the
Uh,
data on it, but
he gets it from the Laboratory of Neuroimaging
okay.
reference. But yeah, he was just getting to the point that we have a lot of thoughts because The thing he
Yeah.
wanted to point out was thoughts, if science is correct with this neuroplasticity, meaning you can actually change the physical nature and grooves and ruts of your brain, right? The mutability of the brain. It is only logical to think that if thoughts can do this, thoughts have consequences.
Absolutely.
And thoughts have consequences both
Yeah.
on the physical and the spiritual nature of it. Now, it's really
Yeah.
interesting whether Paul was aware of this or the New Testament was aware of this. It's very interesting some of the language that is used. You see Ephesians 2:24, be renewed in spirit and mind, Romans 12:2, renewal
Yep.
of the mind. The Greek word here is metamorpho,
Hmm.
which we get the term metamorphosis from, a physical changing of it. Now, it'd be fun
Yeah.
one of these days to ask Paul, right? Paul, what did you mean by that? Like,
Yeah.
over here,
Right.
Paul. Let me talk to
Yeah.
you for a second. Did
Because
you?
we can't know that with absolute certainty, but
We can't
yeah.
know that with absolute
Right.
certainty, right?
Yep.
And and one of the things he points out in Scripture, be it 2 Corinthians 11 or John 8:44, that Satan has a primary aim. When, granted, it's to take down people he loves, but how does he do it? And I agree with Max Lucado here. It is to entangle us in a web of unhealthy thoughts.
Mm.
Our
Yeah.
actions start in our thought world. In the thought world, this is where everything begins.
100%.
This is the causal, like the primary causal relation to how we act. It is in the mind of the person. And so Satan can get your thoughts first and foremost.
Hmm.
Statistically, he's probably got your actions as well.
Absolutely.
And so the renewing
Absolutely.
the mind is why you see such a fundamental like
Hmm.
importance in the primary understanding of how we tame and look more like Christ, right?
Right.
Uh, and here's some other statistic facts he points out after this. Depression is 40% more likely. So, talking about mental issues, depression is 40% more likely to have issues of the heart, like cardiovascular issues. Like if you are mentally depressed or have mental issues, um,
Hmm.
which lead to depression, you're going to have statistically heart issues.
Hmm.
70,
Right.
this one study he read, 75 to 98% of mental, physical, and behavior problems comes from one's thought life.
Wow.
Crazy to think about,
Wow.
right?
Hmm.
Crazy to think about. And
Yeah.
that's why I think, like you said, Paul, especially in Ephesians 6, put on the helmet, right? But there's
Yeah.
an interesting thing that he starts off with. And I like,
Hmm.
once again, I want to sit with Paul and go, Paul, like what were you thinking when you wrote this? Because it's almost like you knew.
Yeah. Well,
Granted,
and even if
Holy
he
Spirit was
didn't know,
telling
the
him.
God who inspired him knew.
Yeah, but I'm just like the Holy
Right.
Spirit was telling, like the fact of what God was telling him to write and how it relates to everyday life is fascinating. And let me read you this. But I'm going to quote Locato here. In the act, it talks about the helmet of salvation because we have these other shields, we have these other weapons in our defense, but there's a particular one that you would think would be something else. At least I think would be something else, right?
Okay.
He talks about the helmet of salvation, not like the helmet of your mind. It's you put on the knowledge of your salvation
Hmm.
to protect
Hmm.
your mind. This is what
Yeah.
Locato. In the act of salvation, he wraps himself like a helmet around our heads. He declares to the enemy, the devil, this mind is mine. I saved it. I own it. I own the person. I'm renewing the person. And so
Hmm.
the key to understanding fundamentally how to tame our thoughts is to embrace the full power of what stepping into salvation means.
Yeah.
Now that is mind-blowing to me to think
Yep.
about it that way. Like first and foremost, how do we tame our thoughts is sort of who do we belong to and who do we take and who is that person of our
Sure.
salvation,
Yep.
right? Um,
Yep.
And
Yep.
so he ends this chapter with a toolkit, and he has three toolkits as the subtitle refers to. And here are the three tools that we're going to be discussing next. The first is this: practice picky thinking, right?
Okay.
What is that? What does that look like? Identify UFOs, and UFO stands for something, not unidentified
Not
flying.
everybody playing. Okay, we're not talking about aliens again today.
Not talking
Okay.
about aliens again. And then the third tool is what he calls uproot and replant. Now, I'm sure
Cool.
you know where that's going with, right?
Sure.
So let's talk
Yeah.
about these three tools. Chapter 2, practice picky thinking. And so he starts off with the story, which I didn't know about the White House Situation Room. Now, a few
Okay.
decades ago, the White House didn't have a situation room. And you know what the situation room is, right? Where everyone sort of
Hmm.
runs to get all the information, all the facts before they can make a decision. He says we got to understand that the Christian life has its own situation room. In the
Hmm.
mind, there's its own situation room, and we need to think about it in this way. He mentions the first and highest call as a Christian is to stand vigil over the mind, because everything
Hmm.
is stemming from the mind. We have to, like, when people watch things they ought not watch, or be places where they're seeing things they ought not see. If
Yeah.
if our life and our actions from 75 to 98% flow from this, I don't think people realize that what you listen to and think about is so
Yeah.
important. It's just like, hey, I can do it myself. No, that movie's not going to affect me, but like you don't realize it like scientifically it is going to affect you. And you're just
Right.
not freak of nature outlier of the
Hmm.
that that your it doesn't affect your brain.
Right.
You're the one person in
Yep.
all history it doesn't affect. Come
Yep.
on.
Unless you're trying to make the claim you're not human, which hopefully that's not the case.
Yeah, and he says this, and I agree with this, and this is why I love apologetics. Discipleship at its core fundamentally is Christ-like thinking.
Hmm.
It's not, hey, how do I get these people to act in this way? How do I get this first to
Yeah.
tithe? How do I get them to be
Yeah.
kind to people? The
Yeah.
fundamental root of all discipleship is to renew the mind of the person. If
Right.
everything stems from there,
Hmm.
that's it's not just, hey, how do I get this person to come to church more? How do they
Yeah.
think about church?
Hmm.
How do they
Yeah.
understand the worldview? Like that's where it stems from.
Well, if what is preaching other than getting people to think differently
Mm-hmm.
about a particular situation in their life,
A hundred
about how
percent.
God operates within that situation, whatever it might be.
And if you tell people just do this because this is what the Bible says, you get the
Right.
same answer. Why? Like, why do I
Exactly.
trust the Bible? Why do I care about this? Why do I like it has to come though how you think about particular things and believe about particular things. And there's one rule that matters above all else, Mike. It's truth. What is true?
Hmm.
Why it's true? Where is the truth? How to get to the truth? Like,
Yep.
truth ought to be in everyone, whether Christian or not, the rule above all else. Let's reach for truth. Hence, when you fall into relativistic societies, you end up having a disaster on your hand years later.
Oh yeah.
It just,
Hmm.
this is what ends up happening.
Let's look at
And
the state that our country's in right now. It's we've
100%.
slipped into this relativistic way of thinking where there is no absolute truth. It's just completely subjective.
Mhm.
And
Uh,
a society cannot function if the individuals within that society can't agree on what truth is.
yeah. And he
Like you
says
said, it's a particular way of thinking.
100%. And if the
Yeah.
overall aim and rule is truth, and we ought to have our own situation room in our minds, right? We need to then figure out like what information is reliable. He says this, good decisions depend upon reliable information. This can involve seeking help and asking others depending on functioning faculties. Inaccuracy to information invites catastrophe,
Hmm.
right? If Trump thinks that a blip on the screen is China sending a nuke over, and he decides to defend with the nuke, and the blip is a smudge on the screen, right? It's going to invite a
Oh.
catastrophe.
Hmm.
But why don't we think? this about our thought lives.
Hmm.
We just seem to be open to think about anything and, well, let's see what this is. Let's just dwell on anything. Like, it seems to me that when we think about something, we ought to put that first through the situation room in our minds and think, does this fact or does this thought deserve to have its own hearing, deserve to have its own, like,
Yeah.
day in court, really? Like, is this a good fact or is this not a fact? Why are we allowing equal weight to things crossing our minds without reason to do so? Like,
Yeah.
it says, he writes this: who came up with the notion that each notion warrants a chair at our mental table?
Mm, it's good.
He
Yeah.
goes, why don't we think hard about what we're thinking about? It seems we ought to be thinking what we are
Yeah.
thinking about. And so this goes into the number one tool. Now, practice picky thinking. Now, do you have any thoughts on that before I go into what he says about?
Not a ton.
Okay.
Mostly just to say that I agree with what he's brought out up to this point, and I've in a different way have told people to do these very same things and bring certain thoughts out into the light. Actually, determine whether or not they're true. I'll tell people, like, you may have a thought. Who told you you had to jump to the conclusion that that thought was true?
Yeah,
How do you
right.
know that that thought is true?
I know.
What is your basis for knowing whether it's true?
If someone implants something in your head, why are you giving it equal weight to what you've already have evidence for? Like,
Right.
I say it to people all the time. Okay, you have someone say, you know, all this information about Christianity, and someone tells you something that goes against it, and all of a sudden you're like, did this disrupt my whole faith? Is
Right.
this is true? Okay. But it's like, why are you giving that just the equal footing at the table than something you've looked after for 10 years and know to be true by experience and facts? Because someone says something, why did you give it a seat at the table?
Right.
It,
Yeah.
it, yeah, it's very weird.
Yeah.
It's
Not all
very,
ideas are created equal.
not all
That's
the
for sure.
exactly. And so he talks about practice picky thinking, and he goes immediately to
Hmm.
sort of my ministry verse, 2 Corinthians 10:4 through 5, when it talks about destroying arguments. Um, Let me read this to you. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have a divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. Now, a lot of times pastors go, they just do,
Go to
hey, 2 Corinthians 10:5b, we take every
right.
thought captive,
Right.
but that's not it. Like, this is talking about a knowledge, arguments raised against the knowledge of God. We destroy thoughts and arguments and logic against
Mm-hmm.
these objections to what we believe. Now,
Mm-hmm.
he says something interesting about these terms in Greek. For instance, the stronghold, right? There's two sort of concepts behind this image of stronghold. The first is this, refers to a prison. And it's the idea you can't get out and can't move forward. Like, you're like sort of trapped. We all know what prison and jail is, right? The second is
Oh yeah.
also understood as this fortress. This idea of thick walls that defy easy access. See, the prison keeps people in, the fortress keeps people out. Strongholds
Mm-hmm.
do both, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have the right knowledge and we produce wrong strongholds, we are trapped. It's difficult to let truth in, and it's difficult to get falsehoods
Mm-hmm.
out. So we need to
Mm-hmm.
be picky about what we think about. And
Yeah.
the next idea is with destroy, like destroying arguments, is to literally mean in the Greek, pull down by force. Where he writes this, quote unquote, take a wrecking ball to them, to the thoughts,
Mm.
to the arguments, to the mental images. It is not just a, oh, look at that. It's you literally have to destroy them, right? And it says one, and then as the verse says, once these arguments, these strongholds in our lives or in other people's lives, which is almost like a very physical, tough, sweat, brutal thing. This isn't just a nicey nicey think about Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Paul here is talking about like a blood, sweat, and tears,
Yeah.
elbow grease type thing that Christians
Sure.
try to be engaged with, not just because they're Christian, but because the divine powers are doing it to us.
Right.
Hence the
Right.
idea of war, hence the idea
Mm-hmm.
of all this metaphor that Paul is using. He says, we then, after all of that hard work, we then have to take our thoughts captive. Once we destroy and rip it apart and beat it down and take it from the prison and rip down the walls, the next thing we do is we take the thoughts captive. And this is what he writes here in the Greek. The literal rendering of the phrase take thought captive is to take one prisoner as with a pointed spear in its back.
Hmm.
It's not a, hey, okay, now we bring it to Christ. It's a, I not letting you get away. If you do, I'm going to spear you.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It's a very almost,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say violent, but it's a very like, this thought is dangerous.
Yeah.
Put the spear to its back. And if it moves, you drive it in type thing. Um, and lastly, what happens is, and I agree with him, and I've read a lot of New Testament scholars on this, and I actually write in my doctoral work a little bit about this as well, of when Paul probably was thinking about this, because what happens when you take someone captive in war back in the day? You would take it to your leader.
Mm-hmm.
You would take it to whoever is your commander, and you would let the commander after like, what do I do with this person?
Mm-hmm.
I have it. We're not letting him go. He's prisoner. Here's the spear. What do you want me to do with him?
Right.
Slave, this, kill it, whatever it is. And I think most importantly here is what you do with the thought, as they would have understood in wartime, is you take it to the king.
Mm-hmm.
What do
Yep.
you want from this thought? You
Right.
demand that it obeys not its king. You
Yeah.
take it to your king, right? Why? Because you've already put the helmet of salvation on.
Mm-hmm.
You already
Mm-hmm.
know who you're loyal to, who's the regal
Right.
leader of everything. You take it to the
Mm-hmm.
king. And so I know we were talking about this last week or 2 weeks ago. In luck, like once again, I think I said it wrong and I felt like I sounded insulting. It's helpful for me to have a lot of mental pictures because it's not as easy for
Yeah.
me to do it as some people, right? I think some people are very blessed to be able to go, oh, this is what I do. And it's like, oh, dang, I wish I could do that, right? And sort of one of the things I've been practicing because of this book is if I have this extra thought or this non-appropriate thought, right? It's it's almost like I have to think of the thought as this anthropomorphic item where I've literally chained its hands behind its back and I have a gun to its head. And I
Mm-hmm.
literally take it to Christ and go, what do I do about it? How should I think
Mm-hmm.
about this? And I think that's very, very helpful. And I think if we have a
Yeah.
mental picture and practice this monitoring of our thoughts, whether it be this or even writing it down. This is what
Mm-hmm.
I thought about.
Mm-hmm.
And then go to God, hey, you're the king. It's your captive. What's your verdict on this thing?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And a lot of times, in a very metaphoric way, he tells me to kill it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not using it. I'm not doing it. I'm not keeping it for some sort of later on use. Drive the spear
Yeah.
through.
Right. Right.
You know
Destroy
what I
it.
mean? And that's the question is if he tells you to destroy it, how do you destroy it? Right? And this is what he says. Actually, you know what? I'll get to that later because that's in the second part. Let me read
Okay.
you this quote he has here. He says, monitor your default thoughts, be aware of your inner dialogue and what practices you need to do this. Whether write it down, pray about it, immediately stop what you're doing and think about this. We must always remember, and I love this, right? Sometimes when we think we've taken it captive, we think we can do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But we must always remember that our own voice in our head may not speak with proper authority. And so you take it to the
Right.
person who has the proper authority.
Right.
You take it to him in prayer, you take
Mm-hmm.
it to his word, and you
Mm-hmm.
go, okay, if my own voice in my head and its decision making, you shouldn't be making your own decisions.
Right.
You
Of
should be
course.
verifying your decision off of what the objective king is telling you to do. And if your
Hmm.
voice in your head is giving it any leeway, you asked to see what you want the king to do with it.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
very, very helpful. And I know writing it down is very, very helpful to some people statistically that you find out that people write it down and then go, Lord, what do you want to do with this?
Right. Yeah,
What do you think
absolutely.
about that first thing, practice picky thinking, and what Paul is really talking about when it comes to it's not this gentle, oh, this thing like, hey, deductive. No, it's a forceful takeover that Paul,
Hmm.
why? Because we are being forcefully taken over, and it starts in the mind.
Sure. Yeah, well, it comes back to what Paul talks about in Ephesians. He
Hmm.
says, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities in the unseen realm. And the battle is for our attention, the battle is for our affections. So if I,
Which is what?
I
Our minds,
right
first and
here,
foremost.
it's all
Right
here.
here. Yep.
And so I think we've undervalued how easily distracted we are, or
Mm.
underestimated the
Oh,
how
yeah.
critical it is that we're distracted. I don't think it's any coincidence that we have this device that has any and all types of information at our disposal, which on one level, when it's channeled and it's got the proper boundaries around it, it can be a wonderful thing. But on another level, it could be incredibly dangerous because those ideas lead to thoughts.
Yeah.
And those thoughts may or may not be in line with what is revealed as truth in the scriptures, in Jesus, in the word. Those things have been time tested. So that's what immediately comes to mind for me
Yeah.
is we're so distracted. We don't think anything of it when we're scrolling through our phones and absorbing information, but are we thinking of how it's forming our minds or deforming our minds?
Right.
I come back to the quote of Marshall McLuhan, a great uh, philosopher in the 1960s. He taught in colleges, and he said, "We become what we behold."
Mm. Right.
And at risk of sounding overly simplistic, it really, to me, comes back to the simple idea that when we're directing our attention back to Christ, and like you said, Ryan, we're actually taking those thoughts to Him. Right?
Hmm.
We're not just letting those sit in our minds. We're not marinating in those thoughts. We're bringing them to Christ,
Yeah.
and we're telling Him, "All right, what do I do with this? What do you want me to do with it?" And He sets the agenda. It's it's critical. It's
Yeah.
huge,
And
and
the fact that we
I
can do that is
mhm,
incredible,
absolutely
right? Like, Jesus, what do you want with this? Right?
right.
And it's rebuke it. This is not what I said for you. That's why I think Paul was so like the first and foremost helmet is the fact that you are saved, right? And that's why Paul's like, hey, don't walk away from these things. Like, run
Yeah.
the race well, understand it, stick with it.
Hmm.
Like, I've done
Hmm.
good things in you. Make sure you do it
Yeah.
well. That we are
Yeah.
saved and we have a king who has overcome everything of this world,
Yeah.
even your thoughts. Everything is
Hmm.
included in your thoughts. And
Hmm.
the God, the Father, has given him the world and everything in it as his footstool. Meaning he's sitting
Hmm.
on his throne and it's your footstool. And we
Yep.
have a king that wants you to come to him and go, I'm going to tell you what to do with it because I know best. And much of the time in my life, it's kill it, rebuke it.
Oh,
This has
absolutely.
nothing to do with you. Get rid of it.
Hmm.
Like, it's not just get rid of it. It's like hand it to me, I'll do it, kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
But like I wanna sort of dig deeper in what you said because I think I
Sure.
don't know why that didn't come to my mind when I was reading this book or sort of taking these notes because I think it's more profound than, and I want people to realize what you said.
Well, when when you look at the topic of taming your thoughts, we can't not talk about mental health. And
Sure.
one of the things I've observed, this is just ancillary, personal experience.
Yeah.
One of the things I've observed is like yes, we've destigmatized mental health. We're talking about it, we're normalizing it. But one thing that's not changing is people aren't getting healthier mentally. It's actually getting worse.
Yes, right.
Right? Right. And like there's this risk of normalizing mental health, but then not doing the right things to address your mental health. And I'm
Yeah,
not anti counselors. I'm pro mental health counseling. I think it's a great thing, and I think it pairs
100%.
really well with biblical truth. Absolutely pairs well with Romans 12 and Second Corinthians, all that we've been talking about so far. But if we're destigmatizing mental health, but we're not properly doing the things that we need to do to make ourselves healthier mentally, we're actually going to make the matter a whole heck of a lot worse. And I think it comes back to what we've been talking about here.
Yeah.
Do we know how to respond to these issues in a biblical way? Because we're in a state now where like I'll have conversations where people are like, "Yeah, I checked into ECMC." Like there are multiple examples without getting into any personal details of people who like they were in the psych ward in a hospital because they had a mental health breakdown.
Yeah.
And I'm not pinning the blame on the individual. I'm not pinning the blame on society. I don't think that's going to be any benefit. But I am saying, look, we have to get back to where are we equipped? Are we ready? Are we actually applying what Paul talks about in
Mhm.
these verses to take these thoughts captive and surrender them to Christ, transform our thoughts by the renewing of our minds so that we can know God's will. Yeah. And
Yeah.
and I don't think the church has really done a really good job of that in the West. Not to I don't want to, I'm not trying to sling mud on the bride. I'm just trying to be honest. It's one of the ways that we haven't really discipled people well.
Yeah. And once again, what you said earlier, two thoughts literally came to my mind. I wrote them down as you were talking about how we live our lives with our phones,
Hmm.
media, working, kids, like whatever you want to throw it in there, right? And here's two thoughts I had. It's this. Here, start first as a question. You said we have undervalued, right? All of these things. We've undervalued how distracted we are. How can we tame our minds when the devices have them?
Hmm.
Like
Absolutely.
we don't leave time to even take them to the king.
Yeah.
And so these quick thoughts, these things that are inappropriate, right? Instead of stopping and going no, we then just add on top of them. So and then we forget the fact that we had that, which has hurt us. And then we say it on top
Hmm.
of that. And if you have another negative one, it's like, okay, well, let's quickly add something on top of that.
Well,
Let's
it's
distract
like
ourselves.
it's like those like ginormous BLT sandwiches that you'll see
Yeah.
on cartoons. They stacked on top. Like you have the thought, and then you have all these other things stacked on top of it, and you're just overwhelmed. You just mentally you shut down at a certain point, and you got to go check yourself in at a institution
Yeah.
because you literally cannot process all of that. You
No,
can't deal with all of that.
no.
Yeah,
And I just think our busyness, as John Mark Comer talks about, is the tool of the devil.
absolutely.
Because it will
Yeah,
just
yeah.
I just the fact that we don't leave time to stop and just think about our thoughts is a
Hmm.
scary notion. And what that
Yeah.
means for deception, what that means for good thinkers. I mean, look at the statistics of ChatGPT with the mental health that's happening out there, right? I mean, we just ask things, take it, then ask it another thing, and go, whoa, 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 whoa. Was that thought that it told me to think about even a good thing to think about? Was that even true? We just don't even ask those questions well. And no wonder
Well,
why.
even technology can think wrongly. It can hallucinate. It can give you wrong information
Oh yeah, we've
because
witnessed
it's
it
create.
ourselves.
Yeah,
Did a
yeah.
podcast about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
Which
how much more are we prone towards wrong thinking? Because we
exactly.
are.
And this
Yeah.
leads to tool number two: identify UFOs. Right. Um, and a UFO means this: untruth, false narrative, and overreaction. Now, he starts this off with a very interesting statistic again. According to the Cleveland Clinic's wellness program, 80% of our thoughts are negative.
Ooh.
I mean,
So
that's
we have 70,000 thoughts a day, right?
well, so
So
let's
what's 80% of
well think
70,000?
about this, Mike. He goes,
Oof.
let's just think of I mean, it's 56,000,
Oh man.
right? But even 1%, 700 negative thoughts a day. Just think about that. 700 negative thoughts a day.
Wow.
How do we not see that these are creating neural ruts that we get stuck in, let alone 56,000? Once you put it there, it's just like, it's almost like the
Wow.
US debt. Oh, what's a trillion anymore? You know what I mean? Like, think about it.
Yep.
It's crazy once you think about these
Yeah.
numbers. And of course, our thought lives, if things stem from it, the neuroplasticity is going to form around
Mm-hmm.
these negative thoughts and produce the kind of person, because this is how your brain works, right?
Yep.
And so he goes, let's start with the first letter, U, untruth, right? The spiritual powers are attacking us with untruths, as we talked
Mm-hmm.
about in the first, the second chapter. Figure out what is true. F, false narrative. He goes, a narrative is a message that ceaselessly plays in your mind. It is the way you see yourself and what you say about yourself or other people, right?
Right.
Untruths will create then a false narrative,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this false narrative leads us to the O, the overreaction. When we make decisions based on the untruth and the false narrative, we often go overboard and go critical on how we then correct these things. So we're making corrections to things that oftentimes don't need correction,
Don't need to be corrected at all.
right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
don't stop to think about what we think about. And
Right.
not only that, but even if we nail something right and we have something true, what weight of the truth do we? So do we overcorrect in a negative way, even though there's some truth in the narrative versus just being
Right.
completely false
Mm-hmm.
narrative? And quote unquote, untruths lead to false narratives that prompt overreactions. So the second tool is to identify, not only realize like, hey, we got to think about our thoughts. Here's how we do it. Here's what we
Sure.
do with it. But when we have these thoughts uh, captive, right, and we investigate them, ask the Lord about these things. Is this an untruth? What's the
Mm-hmm.
false narrative it's producing? How do I react to these things?
Mm-hmm.
You need to think about this in general. Even if you're
Mm-hmm.
like a non-Christian, is it
Mm-hmm.
true? What does it
Sure.
make you think about? And how do I react to these things?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
Right.
identify the UFO, and I think since Christianity is true, right? And I hold that presupposition, and I have the omniscient Lord that I'm taking these to, it is much easier to identify the UFOs than the normal person.
Sure.
That it seems that that's a rational conclusion to lead
Yeah,
to.
if we have access to the mind of Christ, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And then,
Mm-hmm.
which leads to the last and final thing we're talking about, chapter four, tool number three, uproot and replant. Key, ready? Quote unquote. We have access to the very mind of Christ. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Find
Right.
where the roots lie, right? Rip it up.
Yep.
And then the key is not to just leave the spot empty where more weeds can grow,
You got to
but
replace it.
replace it with good things and then feed it with good things
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
continue this process.
I've said this in messages more than once that what you feed lives, what you feed grows, and what you starve dies.
Mhm.
Right? And if you starve negative thinking, if you starve false things that you've chosen to believe about yourself, about God, about the world around you, eventually that's going to wither away and die. But you got to pull it out. You got to identify it.
Yeah,
You got to
exactly.
say that this is a weed. It doesn't belong in the garden of my mind, if we could use that metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you need to replace it with new thoughts. Can I show you a book real quick? This is a book by Evagrius of Pontus, and the book is called, he's a monk. The book is called Talking Back A monastic handbook for combating demons.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So essentially, he goes through all of the lies that a believer might encounter in their thought life, and he replaces it with biblical truth. He
Hmm.
said, when you hear this thought, when you have this thought, here is what you say to that spirit in response. So
Oh, interesting.
talking back, a monastic handbook for combating demons. So I
Great.
just thought that that was a helpful resource to augment everything that we've been talking about with the Max Lucado book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
And
yeah, that. Sorry.
yeah, I was going to ask a quick follow-up question too. I'm curious about your opinion on this because all of the things that we've talked about so far, those are very useful, very helpful for individuals to practically apply to their life. But
Hmm.
what role does the community, the church, play in helping us transform our thought life?
Yeah, so if we go to, let me pull these out again. If we go to like the three tools again, right? I think we can
Hmm.
apply this to the church when it comes to this. First of all, think about what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
Teach people how important the mind is,
Hmm.
people the statistics of how important the mind is, and teach people the truths of the helmet of salvation, right? Like
Hmm.
the fact that I have not heard a pastor in the past 2 years, independent of obviously you, Mike, because I talk to you all the time, in this area, talk about the mutability of the physical brain in relation to the spiritual life, given the culture we're in, is mind blowing to me.
Sure.
It's
Hmm.
mind blowing to me. Produce a
Right.
kind of culture that makes the Christian life both spiritual and physical and how to
Yeah.
connect the two, right? That'd be the first one. When it comes, teach them how to practice picky thinking, right? Teach them how to write things down, give them a
Yeah.
journal, give them what that book does. Like, hey, this might be the
Yeah.
case. This is what you do. This is how you think
Hmm.
about it. Speak,
Sure.
obviously, relate it to false narratives and how we react. I mean, I feel like
Sure.
the church can do a lot of actual everyday practices in this when it comes to taming the thoughts. I also
Hmm.
think the church could do better at destroying the strongholds of the world that start in the mind. And
For sure.
I think the church has a fundamental, which is so funny. The church has a fundamental assumption that, let me rephrase it again. The church, I think, needs to have a fundamental assumption that those who are there are already self-proclaimed believers, which, but also leave room for newbies and non-believers, right? But the
Sure.
point
Or
is,
curious. People who are curious.
most
Yeah.
churches are seeker friendly, right? Who come in with different worldviews, but then they don't attack or approach Christianity from or through those other worldviews. It's so
Hmm.
confusing. Like if
Yeah.
you know you have to fight the battle and tear down strongholds of other people's worldviews, why aren't we doing that? Like you're holding the fundamental assumption that these are the people I want, but then you don't go after what they believe. You just sort of give these Christian pleasantries and you go, hopefully the spirit does the work.
Sure.
Versus like, well, spirit, can you use me to talk about subjectivism or relativism and how we look at that through the Christian lens or human sexuality,
Sure.
biogenesis, something along the lines of that, that
Hmm.
other people who you now are fundamentally assuming will be there, right? And then
Hmm.
you don't fundamentally assume I need to approach their worldview. It's mind blowing to me, Mike. It's very backwards to me. I don't get it.
Yeah. Andy Stanley, come on, man. Get with it. Let's go.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I asked that too, number one, I agree with you on that for sure. I think this book is beneficial for book studies, for all those things. And if an individual is doing this and they're part of a local community, by default, they're going to make that community healthier, right?
Correct.
Because
Yes.
they're going to think about themselves the way that Christ thinks about them. They're going to think about others in the way that Christ thinks about them, and that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And I also think there's another dimension to this that I don't think we've talked about, and it comes back to Jesus' framework for conflict resolution in Matthew 18. In Matthew 18, Jesus says, if you have something against your brother, if your brother has something against you, go to him directly and resolve the matter between the two of you. Where does a dispute, where does a conflict among two people start? It usually starts in how we're thinking about that particular issue.
Yeah.
So when there's wrong thinking and it has to do with another individual, what does Jesus say? Go to that person. Talk to them about it.
Right, exactly.
And so often, and I see this by virtue of what I do, and if there are pastors listening, or if there are people who regularly attend church, maybe you've gone into a counseling session with a pastor, hopefully you've been challenged to go to the individual that you have an issue with directly and try to clarify the situation with them. So for example, if I'm sitting down with a couple and they're arguing about, I don't know, you can come up with a million different things that a couple could be fighting about.
Money.
Take your pick. Take your pick for what you're fighting about. But to ask a simple clarifying question to your spouse or to just your friend, you heard something that they said, and you begin in your mind to tell yourself a story about what they meant by that. You assume the motive that they had behind what they said. You commit what our family pastor likes to call a suicide. You jump to this mental conclusion about what they meant by what they said, and that might not have been what they meant by what they said. And so you ask for clarity. You come up to them and you say, what did you mean by that? You said this. What did you mean by that? Can you clarify for me? Just that simple act can diffuse the issues. Now, it can't make you think differently. It doesn't seem like it could do that, but it could at the very least in that moment, dispel an incorrect thought that you had towards that person, towards that situation. Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. But that was one of the things that came to mind as you were sharing. And I just found that to be a very helpful thing too, that we're engaging in those practices, and we're also allowing the community of believers to provide clarity when there's been some misunderstanding as well. So to go to a person directly and say, hey, what you said this, or you did this, what did you mean by that? Right. Yeah. Cool. Anything else before we wrap things up today, Ryan?
Overall, if anyone's looking for once again, I don't want to say easy read, that sounds insulting, but like a good sit down, grab a coffee, anyone can read type book, and it's
not a heavy mental load to read. This book, right?
It's very helpful. It's very practical. It's got good questions in the back, good tools for the everyday person, even for like a small group to just think about the topic more. It's Max Lucado, Tame Your Thoughts, 3 Tools to Renew Your Mind and Transform Your Life. I think it was like $15 on Amazon.
All right. Well, thank you for listening or watching another episode of The Caffeinated Christian. As always, we ask that you like, share, rate, review our podcast. We love getting our content out to as many people as possible, and we appreciate your help in doing that. And as always, if you have thoughts or ideas or questions on things that we've discussed or suggestions for future episodes, please feel free to reach out to us on Facebook or on Instagram at The Caffeinated Christian. That is at The Caffeinated Christian. We look forward to seeing you next time, and until then, have a great day.